Marcus's words echoed through the backyard like deafening thunder, silencing even the chirping of the birds. I felt my heart stop for an eternal instant, while 20 pairs of eyes turned toward me. There I was, Claire Santos, at 67 years old, surrounded by guests at my future granddaughter's baby shower, still holding in my trembling hands the plate of sweets I had prepared with such care. Marcus's intoxicated smile contrasted with the embarrassing silence that settled in. My daughter Anna, 8 months pregnant, looked away as she always did when her husband humiliated me. In that moment, with the afternoon sun hitting my face, I understood that my own family saw me as a disposable burden. The nervous laughter of some guests cut through the air like sharp blades. Others pretended not to have heard, staring fixedly at their plates. I remained motionless, feeling my dignity shatter into tiny pieces that the wind would carry far away. 67 years of life, 45 years of marriage, 3 children raised with love and sacrifice, and now I was there, being publicly discarded like an old piece of furniture that no longer serves any purpose. "Mom, he didn't mean that," Anna murmured weakly, without even looking me in the eyes. But I knew that Marcus had said exactly what he thought, and worse, my daughter agreed with him, she just didn't have the courage to verbalize it. I placed the plate on the table with hands that trembled imperceptibly and forced a smile that hurt more than 1,000 tears. "Excuse me," I said in a low voice, heading inside the house. I needed air, silence, a corner where I could gather the fragments of my shattered soul. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I shared with cardboard boxes and objects that my daughter considered unnecessary. I let the tears roll freely for the first time in months. How had I gotten to this point? How had the woman who raised 3 children, who worked tirelessly as a seamstress to give them an education, who cared for her sick husband for 2 years until his death, become an unwanted burden? My mind flew to 3 years ago, when Joseph, my dear husband, departed after a courageous battle against cancer. We had been married for 45 years, and our house in Denver, which once echoed with laughter and conversations, became a silent mausoleum. The older children, Paul and Regina, lived in other cities, building their own lives. Anna was the only one who remained close, and when she suggested that I come live with her and Marcus in rural Colorado, my heart filled with hope. "Mom, you can't stay alone in that big house. Come with us, it will be good for everyone," Anna had said, holding my hands with affection. I had believed her, believed that I would be welcome, that I could help with the house, that I would keep my daughter company. Little did I know that I was signing my sentence of daily humiliation. In the first months, Marcus maintained a facade of cordiality when there were visitors. He smiled, called me dear mother-in-law, praised my cooking in front of others. But when the doors closed and the outside world stopped watching us, his true nature emerged like a sinister shadow. "Mrs. Claire, do you still know where the bathroom is, or do I need to make you a map?" he would say with a sarcastic smile when I took a few extra minutes to come out of the bath. "Be careful not to break anything. Those hands aren't steady anymore, right?" He would comment whenever I helped in the kitchen, and the worst: "This house is already starting to look like a nursing home." Anna pretended not to hear. Or maybe she really didn't hear, blinded by love or fear of confronting her husband. I would swallow hard, smile weakly, and pretend that those words didn't cut me inside like sharp razors. I did it for her, so as not to create conflicts, so as not to be seen as the problematic mother-in-law who turns child against spouse. The situation worsened when Anna got pregnant. The pregnancy, which should have been a cause for joy, brought even more tension to our coexistence. Marcus began blaming me for any stress that Anna showed. If she was tired, it was because I had talked too much. If she was nauseous, it was because my constant presence bothered her. Gradually, I began to be expelled from the common areas of the house. First, he locked the living room door in the afternoon, claiming that Anna needed to rest in peace. Then he hid some kitchen utensils, saying that I was disrupting his organization. Finally, he established rigid schedules for me to use the television, as if I were an inconvenient tenant paying late rent. I retreated more and more to the small room that was assigned to me, sewing little clothes for the baby that was coming, preparing handmade keepsakes, dreaming of moments of affection that might come with the arrival of the child. Naively, I believed that being a grandmother would change my position in that house, that I would finally be valued, respected, loved. That's why, when Anna suggested having the baby shower, I offered to help with all the enthusiasm I had left in me. I spent weeks preparing every detail. I hand-sewed 25 keepsakes, prepared 3 different types of sweets, made a clothesline with tiny clothes that I had embroidered with so much love that my fingers ached. Each stitch was a prayer, each detail an expression of the love I felt for that child who hadn't even been born yet. On the morning of the baby shower, I woke up before sunrise, excited as I hadn't been in months. I prepared everything with the care of a professional, arranged the tables in the backyard, organized the chairs, placed fresh flowers in small vases that I had painted especially for the occasion. For a few hours I felt useful again, alive, important. The guests began arriving around 3 in the afternoon. They were friends of Anna and Marcus, neighbors, some people from the church we attended. I received compliments for the sweets, the keepsakes, the decoration. For a fleeting moment, I felt valued. Anna smiled, Marcus joked with friends, and I was happy, really happy. But the happiness of people like me seems to have a very short expiration date. As the hours passed, and Marcus consumed more beer, his comments became more acidic, more direct. It started with little jokes about mothers-in-law who don't know when to exit the scene, evolved to comments about houses that are getting too cramped, and culminated in that phrase that would echo in my ears for years to come. "We're going to live better without you around, right, Mrs. Clare?" After the embarrassing silence, the party continued as if nothing had happened. People went back to talking. Anna forced smiles. Marcus laughed, as if he had told an innocent joke. But I knew that something had definitively broken. It wasn't just my dignity that was in tatters, it was my illusion that I had a place in that family. That night, after all the guests had left and the house returned to silence, I lay in bed, looking at the ceiling, listening to the nocturnal sounds that seemed to echo my loneliness. Anna hadn't come to talk to me, hadn't offered explanations or apologies. Marcus snored in the next room, as if nothing had happened. And me? I finally understood that I was alone in the world. It was then that I made the decision that would change my life forever. I got up silently, took my old travel suitcase, the same one I had used on my honeymoon with Joseph 45 years ago, and began to pack my few belongings. There weren't many things, some clothes, family photographs, the Bible my mother had given me at my wedding, reading glasses, some medications, an entire life fitting in a small suitcase. I wrote a short note for Anna. "Daughter, I'm going to stay at Aunt Frances's house for a while. Don't worry about me. Take care of yourself, and take care of the baby. I love you." I left the note on the dresser, and went out the front door, feeling the cold dawn air touch my face like a liberating blessing. My deceased sister Frances's house was a 20-minute walk from there. It had been abandoned for 3 years, since she died, but I had the keys. Paul had suggested selling it several times, but something always made me postpone that decision. Now I knew why. God had prepared a refuge for me when I needed it most. The house was exactly as Frances had left it. Furniture covered by white sheets, layers of dust over everything, spider webs in the corners, a musty smell that betrayed abandonment. There was no electricity, cut off 2 years ago for non-payment, nor running water working, but it was mine. At that moment, it was the only place in the world where I could be without being seen as a burden. In the first days, I lived practically in the dark, using candles I found in a kitchen drawer. I cleaned the house little by little, one room at a time, each movement being a form of meditation, of reconnection with myself. Sometimes, I would stop and cry for the pain, for the rejection, for the loneliness. But I also cried with relief. There, no one humiliated me. No one made me feel disposable. The neighborhood soon noticed movement in the blue house. That's how it was known, due to the color of the exterior walls. Mrs. Mercedes, who lived next door, was the first to appear. She brought a cornbread cake, and much curiosity. "Claire, dear, what a joy to see you here. I thought you were living with Anna," she said, sitting on the porch as if we were longtime friends. I briefly explained that I had decided to live alone for a while, that I missed independence. Mrs. Mercedes didn't insist on details. Elderly people have that wisdom of respecting silences, but offered practical help. She brought flashlights, managed to get the electricity reconnected in my name, introduced me to other neighbors. Little by little, the blue house began to come alive again. I had found an unexpected purpose. People in the neighborhood began to seek me out. Mrs. Antonia came looking for advice about her rebellious grandson. Mr. John appeared to talk about loneliness after his wife's death. Younger women brought relationship problems, professional dilemmas, maternal anxieties. I offered coffee, homemade cookies, and mainly, attentive ears. There was something therapeutic about listening to other people's problems. They made me realize that I wasn't alone in suffering. More importantly, they made me feel useful again. People valued my experience, my patience, my ability to offer different perspectives. It was like this that, on a rainy afternoon in March, Joanne appeared at my door. She was at most 25 years old, her eyes swollen from crying so much, a small suitcase in her hand, and marks on her neck that she tried to hide with a scarf. I didn't need to ask anything. I immediately recognized the signs. I had seen the same expression in the mirror during some difficult periods of my own marriage, when Joseph went through alcoholism crises. "Please," was all she managed to say before collapsing in tears. I opened the door without hesitation. I prepared hot tea, offered a warm bath, spread clean sheets on the living room sofa. Joanne had fled from an abusive relationship. Her partner didn't physically assault her frequently, but the psychological violence was constant. He controlled her money, her friends, her outings. He threatened to hurt her small daughter if she tried to leave. "I have nowhere to go," she cried. "My family doesn't believe me. They say I'm exaggerating, that every marriage has problems." How well I knew that pain. The pain of not being believed, of having your feelings minimized, of being seen as dramatic or exaggerated when you try to verbalize real suffering. I held Joanne's hands and said, with all the firmness I could muster, "Here you have a place, for as long as you need." Joanne stayed 3 weeks. During this period, we managed to contact social services, file a police report, find a lawyer to help her with custody of her daughter. But more important than the legal procedures was the emotional healing process. We talked for hours. I shared my own experience of reconstruction after losses. She gradually recovered her self-esteem and confidence. When Joanne finally got a job and rented a small apartment, she said goodbye to me with tears in her eyes. "You saved my life," she said. "One day I'll repay this." "You already have," I replied, sincerely. "You reminded me what I'm good for." Word of Joanne's situation spread discreetly through the neighborhood. Other women began to appear, some fleeing domestic violence, others simply needing a safe place to reorganize their lives after separations, layoffs, family problems. The Blue House became an informal refuge. I didn't plan this, it simply happened, as if it were a calling I didn't know I had. Each woman I welcomed brought her own pain, but also her own strength. Together, we created a support network that went far beyond offering temporary shelter. Maria, who arrived after Joanne, was an excellent cook and took responsibility for meals. Carla had experience in administration and organized a basic financial control system to manage the donations that began to arrive. Patricia, who had been a hairdresser, improvised a small salon in the backyard, where she offered free services to women in the community. Somehow, we transformed trauma into purpose, pain into collective healing. If you're following this story and identifying with the strength we found in adversity, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other accounts like this. Real stories of women who discovered their power when everything seemed lost, because I believe we need to inspire each other to keep fighting, to keep believing that our lives have value, regardless of what others say about us. The news of the House of Strong Women, as the neighbors began to call us, reached the local media. A young reporter from Channel 7 News appeared one day, interested in doing a story about community social support initiatives. I was nervous. I didn't want exposure, didn't want them to think we were doing something irregular or taking advantage of other people's situations. But the reporter, named Fernanda, had a respectful approach. She talked at length with me and some of the women who were staying at the house at that time. The story that aired was sensitive, focusing on the importance of female solidarity and the positive impact that small actions can have on the community. The result was surprising. Donations began arriving from throughout the region: clothes, non-perishable foods, hygiene products, furniture, appliances. Volunteers appeared offering various services. An electrician rewired the entire electrical installation for free. A plumber solved the plumbing problems. Women from the local church organized to give sewing and crafts classes. In 6 months, the Blue House had transformed into a small institution, not official. I never sought legal formalization, but recognized and respected by the community. We came to simultaneously house 15 women and 8 children. The backyard became a community garden. The garage transformed into a sewing workshop. The porch became a collective therapy space where we gathered every afternoon for conversations and venting. And it was precisely on one of those afternoons, almost a year after my departure from Anna's house, that I saw a familiar figure standing at the gate. My daughter was there, holding in her arms the daughter I hadn't yet met in person. Anna was thinner, with a face marked by a sadness I recognized very well. Beside her, 2 small suitcases revealed that her visit wasn't merely social. I walked to the gate with my heart racing. So many nights I had dreamed of this moment, imagined what I would say, how I would react. But when I saw the tears streaming down my daughter's face, all the rehearsed words dissolved. "Mom," she said with her voice choked. Forgive me for being a coward, for not defending you, for letting him treat you that way." Anna knelt right there, in front of the gate, holding the baby with one arm, and extending her free hand toward me. I was so wrong, so very wrong. I couldn't speak immediately. I stood looking at her. My daughter, whom I had carried in my arms, taught to walk, consoled on so many nights of fever, guided through first romantic disappointments, there vulnerable, asking forgiveness with a humility that hurt in my chest. "Get up, daughter," I finally said, extending my hands to help her. "Let's talk." We sat on the porch, Anna still holding the baby who slept angelically. She told me everything: how Marcus had gotten worse after my departure, becoming even more controlling and aggressive; how she had finally understood that what I suffered in silence was real, constant microaggressions that undermined self-esteem and dignity; how he had also begun to verbally abuse her, especially after the baby was born. He said I was fat, that I didn't take proper care of the house, that I was an incompetent mother. Anna cried as she spoke. "And then I remembered all the times he spoke to you like that, and I pretended not to see. How could I have been so blind, Mom? How could I have let him hurt you like that?" The last straw had been when Marcus, during an argument about money, shouted that he was tired of supporting 2 useless mouths, referring to Anna and the baby. That's when she decided to leave, even without having anywhere to go. "I thought of you immediately," she said. "I thought of your strength, your dignity, of how you managed to start over alone after everything we put you through. I came here because I know you're the only person in the world who will welcome me without judgment." I held my daughter's face between my hands, wiping her tears with my thumbs. In that moment, I didn't feel anger or resentment. I felt only love, a maternal love that had survived all the humiliations, all the disappointments, all the pain. "You're home," I said simply. Anna and little Sophia joined our unconventional family at the Blue House. My daughter naturally integrated into the routine of mutual care we had established. She helped with the other women's children, cooked, organized donations. Gradually, she recovered the self-esteem and independence she had lost during the years of abusive relationship. My granddaughter's presence brought new joy to the house. Sophia became the mascot of all the women who passed through there. She was spoiled, cared for, loved by a dozen aunts who found in her innocence an extra reason to believe it would be worth rebuilding their own lives. Meanwhile, I learned from neighbors that Marcus had moved away from the city. He lost his job due to excessive absences. Apparently, he had developed alcohol problems after our departure. He also faced workplace lawsuits for moral harassment against female employees and owed months of rent. His life had collapsed in the same way he tried to tear down the lives of people around him. I didn't feel pleasure in his failure. Actually, I felt pity. Pity for a person who had wasted so much time and energy trying to diminish others instead of building something positive for himself. But mainly, I felt gratitude. Gratitude for the way his cruelty had pushed me toward my true purpose. 2 years had passed since I left that house in silence, carrying only a suitcase and wounded dignity. Today, the Blue House shelters 23 women and 15 children. We have partnerships with public social assistance agencies, receive regular donations from local businesses, count on volunteers specialized in various areas: psychology, law, education, health. More important than the numbers, we are a family. A chosen family, built not by blood ties, but by bonds of mutual understanding, respect, and genuine love. Each woman who arrives wounded and leaves strengthened reminds me of my own healing process. Each child who grows up here shows me that it's possible to break cycles of violence and create healthy environments, even in the midst of adversity. Anna got a job as an administrative assistant at City Hall and is studying education on weekends. Sophia, who is now 2.5 years old, speaks precociously and calls all the women in the house grandma, which fills me with tenderness and pride. My daughter has transformed into a strong, conscious, engaged woman. Sometimes, I look at her playing with Sophia in the backyard and think that maybe it was necessary to go through the pain to reach this place of fulfillment. Paul and Regina, my other children, finally came to visit us last month. They were impressed with what they found. "Mom, you've become a community leader," said Paul, hugging me with pride. Regina cried when she saw the garden, the workshops, the movement of supportive women we had created. "I never imagined you were capable of something like this," she confessed. I smiled. I had never imagined it either. I spent 67 years of my life believing that my value was linked to caring for the nuclear family, to the traditional role of wife and mother. It never occurred to me that I could have an impact on so many people's lives, that I could be an instrument of social transformation, that I could age not as a burden, but as a force. Today, when I wake up in the morning at the Blue House, I feel an energy I hadn't experienced in years. There's always someone needing advice, some situation to resolve, some new project to implement. I am useful, I am necessary, I am loved, but mainly, I am respected. Sometimes, I receive news about Marcus through mutual acquaintances. He's living alone in a neighboring city, has changed jobs several times, can't maintain lasting relationships. I heard he developed depression. Part of me feels compassion. I recognize in him a lost man who never learned to love without controlling, to coexist without dominating. Other times, women arrive here telling stories similar to mine: in-laws who treat them as disposable, children who feel embarrassed by their elderly mothers, families who see aging as synonymous with uselessness. Whenever I hear these accounts, my heart tightens, but it also fills me with determination. That's why I continue here, opening the doors of the Blue House to those who need refuge, offering my experience to those who need guidance, sharing my space with those who need shelter. Because I learned that our true family isn't always the one we're born into, but the one we choose to build based on true love. I discovered that aging can be a process of liberation instead of limitation, that we can reinvent ourselves at any stage of life, that our worth as human beings doesn't diminish with the years. On the contrary, it can expand in ways we never imagined when we were young. Whenever someone asks me how it all began, how I managed to transform a situation of humiliation into such a meaningful life project, I respond with a smile that carries all the tears and all the victories of these years. It was after hearing that I was a burden, that other people's lives would be better without me. Funny how love finds new paths when contempt tries to bury us. The Blue House taught me that we are seeds. Even when they try to bury us, even when they believe they've eliminated us, we can sprout, we can grow, we can flourish in ways that surprise even ourselves. And I, Claire Santos, at 70 years old, am flourishing as I never imagined possible.